Hey everybody, and happy 2020. So, I thought to make up for the lack of content I've been posting that I would review every single movie I saw in 2019. All 48 of them. Please help. I'm of course just talking about movies that were released within the year. And by the way, if there's a movie that I don't talk about in here that you wanted to maybe hear my thoughts on, it's either because I didn't get a chance to see it or I straight up just didn't want to support it. So let's just jump right into this and start reviewing some movies. This is in alphabetical order, by the way, and the first two movies just so happen to have heavily featured dog narration. That's weird. And we're starting out with a doozy. A Dog's Purpose is really, really bad. Now, I'm the kind of person who wants to either watch exceptionally great or exceptionally terrible movies, but this one, not so much, because it's the kind of bad movie that you just can't even really enjoy how incompetent it is. It's just annoying. I figured out shortly after it was over that my problem with it was that nothing felt like it was a natural continuation of the story. It all just felt like it was supposed to be emotionally manipulative. Like, oh, what's the sad thing that's happened in another movie before? Okay, let's make that sad thing happen in this movie and we'll emotionally manipulate the audience. The mom character in this movie, too, like, I can't quite put my finger on it, but something about her performance just makes me irrationally angry. Like, I just wanted to break something every time she opened her mouth. I would go further in depth, but every time I start talking about this movie, I get an acute pain in my left temple, so I should probably stop talking about it. The other movie that heavily features dog narration that I saw this year was The Art of Racing in the Rain, which is literally just a slightly more tolerable version of A Dog's Journey. Rarely do you find an imitator that's better than the thing it's imitating, but it's like the people who wrote this movie just said, okay, let's get some actual halfway decent actors in this thing and try to have a somewhat naturally flowing narrative, but I still wouldn't recommend it. It's not good. Avengers Endgame, the one movie that I actually did review this year. My opinion on it went down just a little bit because after a second watch, it just isn't as tightly constructed as I would have liked it to be. It's definitely not as tightly constructed as Infinity War, which is my favorite Marvel movie. But if you want my other basic thoughts on the movie, just go watch my Endgame review. Between Two Ferns, the movie was just not that great for the most part. A couple moments that actually genuinely made me laugh, but they just don't do enough with the concept that they've been given to justify it existing, I don't think. I thought Booksmart was fine, I guess, for the most part. It's one of those movies I just don't understand the hype around it. Like, there's some good moments in it for sure, but it's nothing special, I don't think, compared to most other mainstream comedies. I think what I find the most funny is when the characters themselves are what's funny instead of just the writers cracking jokes all the time. You know what I mean? If you like mainstream comedies, then you should definitely give this a watch, but it just didn't do all that much for me. Breakthrough. I'm not going to touch the religious aspect of this movie with a 10-foot pole, but my issue has always been with these kind of movies like God's Not Dead and this is that you can have a religious message, but you have to have something else to offer, because take the religious side out of this movie and you're basically left with nothing. What you're left with is just a boring, bland, poorly shot, poorly acted movie that doesn't have a stylistic bone in its body. Climax, or its alternate title, could just be Anxiety Attack the Movie. The last 45 minutes or so of this movie is just total chaos. It reminds me a little bit of that movie Mother from 2017 in a way. But other than that, the camera work is the key to everything because it's phenomenal and it's pretty crazy to think about the amount of planning that had to go into just about every frame of this movie. It's definitely not a movie for everybody though. Like, I wouldn't blame you one bit if you watched this and just absolutely hated it, but I personally really liked it because of the stylistic choices on display, and I also don't think I'm ever going to drink sangria again. Dolomite is my name. Really good to see Eddie Murphy doing some actual quality work again. Simply put, it's just a fun watch. It also reminded me a little bit of The Disaster Artist, but it's actually a little bit better in that aspect of recreating scenes from an infamous movie. El Camino was pretty good, I would say. If I was gonna complain a little bit about it, I don't think this really feels all that much like the character of Jesse in Breaking Bad. It's like they tried to make him a little bit too cool. But other than that, I really like the way that they tied up a few loose ends that were left at the end of the show. And yeah, pretty much anything that continues Breaking Bad, I'm gonna like. Alright, are you ready for the most confusingly named movie of the year? Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil. Extremely Evil. No, Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. The title of your movie should not be a tongue twister. But yeah, I thought it was decent. There were a few really questionable choices that they made in terms of how they presented the story, but Zac Efron is really underrated as a dramatic actor, I think. I think this is still on Netflix, so if you want to check it out, go ahead. The Fanatic. This movie, man, I'm just gonna let this clip speak for itself.
No, don't read it! Ah! Don't read it! Don't read it! Don't read it! Ow! Help! 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 Just help there! I'm just stop hitting me! Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Are you okay? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That's a nosebleed. That's bad. That's bad. I had a nosebleed. It wasn't fun.
Yeah, that's a scene that occurs. Moving on, fighting with my family. The ending of this movie just totally ruined the experience for me. It's a small spoiler, but I don't think you can really spoil it. They treat her winning the WWE Championship as though it's like Rocky winning the big boxing match at the end, but am I wrong, or is it just completely meaningless because WWE matches are fixed? Like, I don't get it. Am I missing something here? Other than that, it was not particularly unique, but, enjoyable. That ending, though. 5 feet apart. The biggest problem with this movie is definitely violating the show don't tell rule. Like, literally every piece of information we can find out about the characters is just blah, blah, blah. Just regurgitated exposition. Also, the friend character in this movie, it's just hilarious how unearned his death is. Like, we were supposed to care about him? What? Ford v Ferrari, the dad movie to end all dad movies. It was pretty good for the most part. I don't think I have any plans to ever rewatch it, but I enjoyed myself. Christian Bale's performance and the sound design of the racing sequences are definitely what improved this movie from just being your average true story biopic, run of the mill, whatever you want to label it. I'm also a sucker for just movies that portray people who are just passionate about something, just fighting through things to pursue their passion. If that kind of thing is interesting to you, you should definitely watch this. Glass. Man, M. Night, you had a chance to really get yourself back on track, but you couldn't help yourself, could you? Weirdly enough, this movie felt way, way, way less professional than Split did, even though this had over twice the budget. And don't get me wrong, I can see what he was trying to do here. He was trying to make another small-scale, grounded comic book movie like Unbreakable, but the sets in this movie just felt like movie sets, whereas Unbreakable actually felt like it was taking place in an established world. This just looks like Bruce Willis, Samuel L. Jackson, and James McAvoy showed up to a set and said words. Godzilla King of the Monsters. This movie didn't even try with the story. If you want to see a bunch of giant monsters fighting Godzilla, this is the movie for you, as long as you don't care about anything else that's tying it together. How to Train Your Dragon 3. Alright, I'll tell you, I adore the first two How to Train Your Dragon movies, but this one just didn't feel quite as well rounded as the previous two. It's still pretty good by most means, but I just didn't feel myself as invested in the story for some reason. I couldn't even really tell you why. It's just like, there's something there, but it's not quite there, you know? I still recommend you watch all three movies, though. They're definitely worth your time. Hustlers. Jennifer Lopez can actually act. Who would have thought? But really, this movie was just a big the real life story that it's based on is definitely an intriguing one, but like, can we go 5 minutes without a montage sequence? Like calm down, let the scene breathe a little bit. The Irishman, 3.5 hours of Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Joe Pesci talking about mob stuff. How could I not love it? My only real complaints about this are that the first 2 hours aren't nearly as engaging as the last hour and a half, which, by the way, is just mwah. And also, there are times where the de-aging is really noticeable, especially in Robert De Niro's performance as a younger version of himself. Like, there's a scene where he's beating a guy up, and it just looks hilarious because it's 70 something year old Robert De Niro trying to beat a guy up. But other than that, this movie is just fantastic. And the last hour and a half, like I said, is just phenomenal. And it takes the story in a direction that you really wouldn't expect. And it's really sad by the end. Also, Joe Pesci might just give my favorite supporting performance of the year. His temperament in this movie is basically the exact opposite of classic Joe Pesci that you probably know from Casino or Goodfellas, but there's a sense that you can just feel brewing within him that, like, if you cross him, he might just murder your entire family without even blinking. But yeah, it's on Netflix, and you can definitely watch this in chunks. I've seen outlines of moments where you can pause it and then pick up later if you don't want to commit to a 3.5 hour Scorsese movie. But I loved it. I definitely recommend it. Isn't it romantic? This is a frustrating movie to talk about because I'm a sucker for a good parody movie, but if you're gonna make a parody about an entire genre of film, you have to go full force. You can't stop and actually just become what you're supposedly making fun of. Like, the last third of this movie just straight up forgot that it was supposed to be a parody. Jexy. Hold on, I'll be right back. Alright, if you're even thinking about watching this movie, watch this movie instead, because this is Jexy, but just 1,000 times better in every possible way. Jojo Rabbit. I adore Taika Waititi as a director, and he made just a really well balanced comedy, but also a really hard hitting emotional movie. There are parts of it that just don't feel tonally appropriate, but I mean, that's clearly what he's going for. It's just something that sort of bugs me. The main kid actor in this movie, I don't remember his name, but he gives one of the best child performances I think I've ever seen. You should definitely seek this out if you haven't seen it already.